Hailing frequencies open and welcome aboard Treks and Tangents. I'm your co-host Brian.
And I'm your co-host Jackie. I'm the Star Trek newbie who treks off on tangent.
And I'm your Star Trek expert who is here to get the tangents back on track. Each episode we watch and talk about a different Star Trek episode, and this week we watched
Star Trek, the original series, Season 1, Episode 25, The Devil in the Dark.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for another episode.
25.
25. Officially 26, because, again, the numbering sequence is the cage is 00. So, 26th episode of the podcast.
It's still exciting.
Jackie made a comment to me as she was watching the episode, and I was walking by the living room. You have some memory of this episode.
Yes, I have seen this as a child, a wee girl.
Okay, so you have some memory of it.
Yes.
But last week you gave a Turbolift tease.
I didn't know the title and this episode went together.
In which you gave a guess to...
I'm sure it was delightful.
This week's episode's plot. So, computer, what was Jackie's Turbolift tease last week?
Jackie's Turbolift tease last week was, somehow, when the Enterprise crew has already closed out one of their missions, they are going on their next traveling experience. But someone stows away, and this little guy or gal creates havoc, and we actually have to get rid of them and send them back to wherever they came from.
So, Jackie, how accurate do you think your guess was this week now that you've seen the episode?
It obviously is for a different episode. I think you got it wrong.
No.
You mixed them up.
I definitely got my notes correct. So, definitely not an episode about a stowaway, not an episode about the Enterprise closing out a mission or anything along those lines.
Because you got you picked up the wrong one.
Sure. So, where do you remember watching this episode?
At home. When I was a child with my dad.
Okay. So, do you remember all of it? Was it...
No, just the end.
Just the end. So, it's just kind of the ending and some of the little details to it.
Yes.
Okay.
The balls.
Did you know in the beginning when they're in the administrator's office and we get the first glimpse of one of those balls and Spock's fascination with it, was it obvious to you that it was an egg?
No.
Okay.
No, I didn't know any of that. All I remember is thinking, wow, we had all those little balls at the grocery store.
Yes.
Because, the little bouncy ball, except now they have princess faces on them.
Right.
My grocery store, it was just, can we have the glitter one?
The glitter one.
Yeah.
Yep. So Spock and his fascination with the balls.
Yes.
What, other than that, are your initial impressions to this week's episode? What did you think of it?
I mean, I honestly laughed through a bunch of it because I just couldn't see all these grown men gathering around these weird looking objects, and I don't know, they were so serious, and I was just like, wow, that's a ball. It was just me just thinking them acting.
That's a ball
in the styrofoam set.
They're in a styrofoam set. That's a guy under a blanket with a bunch of crap glued to it.
Yes, or else like McCoy's like, I can't fix this, and he's like, I'm a star.
I'm the star of the episode at the very end.
Or like when they went down the two tunnels, and Spock must have like great legs. He worked out really good on his legs because he's super crouched, walking on his like bent legs, and Kirk is crawling through the tunnel and then kneeling. I don't know. I just think it's funny. The more that my body breaks, the more I notice how other people's work.
Right. So, ultimately, with all the laughing aside, did you like the episode?
I did.
You did like the episode?
Yes, I did.
I liked the episode, too. It's got a lot of fun little things to the episode without injecting too much into the episode. For a plot, it's very streamlined.
Yes.
We have the straightforwardness of a monster attacking everyone. It slowly builds and builds and gets more and more serious. We have the increase in aggression of hunting the monster. We have the big reveal at the end that they're not a monster, the resolution. They don't try to inject too much into it, I think. There's not a whole lot of outside plot points being introduced and dragged in. If anything, it's just a straightforward plot, which I enjoy. Love the set. I think it's a fun set.
Yes. Whenever they throw lots of things at once, that is very confusing for me. And this was very like A, B, B, C. Oh, there's a D. Oh, back on track kind of thing.
Right. And of course, there's always going to be that 11th hour reveal for a plot twist at the end to make the episode interesting. But I enjoy it when it's something that doesn't have to revolve around some kind of made up pseudo sci-fi science where they go, oh, by the way, we have this wonderful technology that we're just going to pull out of our rear ends and use it. We already are familiar with the Vulcan mind meld.
Yes. I learned more about it. It could do a lot of things.
It can do a lot of things. So we already know about the Vulcan mind meld, which is kind of what brings us around the turn of the plot to get to the resolution. We didn't have to invent some other piece of technology. Scotty didn't have to wire together some kind of universal translator that hasn't existed before. So
he made a dialysis machine.
Made a dialysis machine. We made a pump. So, but
well, I also noticed that the men and women who play these characters, they are also getting more pretty, and we're having lots of glamour shots in the camera action.
Who is the pretty character in this episode?
We had both Spock and Kirk have that duo side-by-side profile shot.
Okay.
And then we have Scotty when he's on the Enterprise. Like, he's all glammed up. And then we have McCoy with his hand up someone's butt. Ooh.
I guess Jaci has identified the butt on the carpet monster. Don't know that that's how that works, but okay. Definitely the episode and the camera framing, the fact that it takes place in these cavern sets, I think adds a lot of interesting camera work that they're able to do that they don't normally get to do in other settings and rooms and on the bridge and so forth. So it is a pretty episode.
Yes, I love the colors.
It's a great use of the colors. We've talked about it before, how the original series was used to kind of push and sell color televisions at the time. They're a new invention. So.
And also, we have to remember that this planet is totally for mining, and the chief engineer notices that they're finding the more expensive minerals. So I think that's also what we see in the colors.
Sure.
It's showing all the different colors of Earth, put together and expensive.
Sure. Even though a lot of the sets, I think, are reused and just filmed from different angles, and the bluish green rock cave walls throughout, they definitely do take the opportunity to redress a lot of the sets with, I'm sure it's just glass, but it looks like minerals on the floor, mining equipment, and so forth. So definitely adding to that overall look.
And all the grocery store purple balls.
And every toy childhood bouncy ball. We'll burn that fun fact. How did you know that the eggs were bouncy balls?
The minute I saw it.
The minute you saw it, just instantly knew what it was.
Yes, it's like a core memory. I never got one of those, but I always wanted one.
Okay. Well, enough with our initial impressions. I think ultimately we like the episode.
Yeah.
So let's just jump into it. Why don't you walk us through this week's episode?
So we also start differently, I think. We first start like in distress on the planet. Something has been harming the men on this, the men that are miners on this planet. And they're doing a shift change. And the poor guy it's his turn on duty, he's scared out of his mind. He doesn't want to be alone, but he has to be alone. And they're only 3 minutes away. This gentleman's name is Schmitter. Poor guy. But 50 people have already been killed.
By some unknown, they're very quick to refer to it as a monster, very quickly to set the scene and the tone for the viewer that this is an unknown entity, an unknown monster, not a phenomena, not some anomalous thing that's occurring within the mines. They are very quick to point out that this is a monster of some kind.
And so Schmitter is very scared because when it's killing people, it's burning them like to crisp. And basically Chief Vandenberg tells him, this is yours for 4 hours, buck up, and we're only 3 minutes away.
Right. They're also important to point out, they're not mining. This isn't a shift change of people actively mining in the mines. These are guards that are solely out there looking and guarding against this monster that has been attacking everyone.
So he's like, oh, a lot happens in 3 minutes. But he's looking forward because the Enterprise is coming whenever they get there. So as they leave, the monster then attacks and Schmitter is dead.
Yeah, and we get the attack. It's shot as a point of view from the monster's point of view, where we're doing a first-person shot against the victim of the attack. So we don't actually see the monster in any of these initial attacks. We just see the fearful reaction of the victim. And the monster makes the attack, runs away. They all run back. Schmitter's dead. He's a smoldering pile of ash.
I like how they made the little body.
Yeah.
Well, the outline.
Yes. And then we get our opening credit. With all of that teaser, the cold opening, I really enjoy these types of openings to the episode to a point where it's more enjoyable than when we start an episode and it's just captain's log, everyone's on the bridge. We get the handheld explanation, usually from Kirk, explaining where they're going, what they're doing. I like these little cold opener teasers where we don't really know what's going on yet as the viewer. We're just being presented with this short little play before we get into the meat and bones after the opening credits.
Exactly. It's like, yay, something happened. I mean, sorry you had to die, but sometimes it's boring. Hello, from the bridge. We're off to see this planet.
Yes.
So now we're opening and we are actually beaming directly from Enterprise onto, well, the planet's name is Janus 6.
Correct.
My Janus is back.
Also of note, this is going to be the first and maybe the only episode of the original series where the opening scene coming back from the opening sequence is not the Enterprise flying through space, because we don't get that. As Jaci said, we immediately are transitioning and seeing the beam down effect of the away team coming down to the planet. We don't see the Enterprise at all until the first shot we get of the Enterprise is on the bridge when they call up to Scotty much later into the episode.
So Kirk, Spock, and McCoy have beamed on to meet with Chief Vandenberg, who tells them this whole saga, how it started 3 months ago, and everything that we just said. Once they got to level 23, that's where they found all of this, first what they are mining for per GM, and that's what their main focus is. But on this level also, they found other minerals too. It was like a surprise.
A lot of precious metals that are used for a variety of things, used by Starfleet.
And so they need help. That's why they called Enterprise. Help us figure out this creature, and we need to get back to work. Because on top of that, it's harming all of our equipment.
Right. So the order of sequence that the administrator explains is that they get down to this lowest level that they've ever tried to mine before. And the first thing that happened is their equipment started to malfunction. The parts of the equipment was being corroded. It sounded like overnight, not in front of their eyes, literally.
Yeah, they go to bed and then the creature played with it.
Right. So Interesting to note, jumping ahead and looking through the entire episode, the creature, the monster, does eventually start killing off the miners. But it doesn't sound like that was its first reaction. Its first reaction was just to sabotage the equipment that was threatening the hatchery, the eggs.
Surprise.
So, not really a monster, just kind of elevating its response as needed.
Like Mama Bear.
Yeah, but...
Monster.
But
Mama Monster.
Mama Monster. But specifically, its first reaction is not to kill people and not to harm them, but to just destroy the equipment that they're using. Interesting note that's never really explored. But then, after this equipment is being corroded, they continue to just bring in new equipment, repair it as needed, and it's then that the monster starts killing people and escalating its response.
And so the away team, as we call it, I like that you call it that. That makes more sense. They ask, well, do we even know what this monster looks like? I mean, you could say anything's a monster. Everyone's dead. And then this pompous man, I don't like him from the get-go.
No.
He's also like the lead. He's a chief processing engineer, Ed Appel. It could be Apple, but Appel. And he's like, I shot it and I hit it, but it ran away.
Yes.
And he was like, ha ha ha.
Deadeye Appel in his flashy purple jumpsuit.
Yeah, they all wear really ugly outfits.
Right. But Appel's the only one wearing the purple, the pimpin' purple jumpsuit. Everyone else is wearing like orange or light red, tan, peach.
And when they had clubs, because they didn't have guns, he has a purple club.
I think it's silver metal, but it's the only one. It's the only one in the group.
So, and then they all leave, just leaving Kirk, McCoy, and Spock together in the room, along with the chief, Vandenberg, to discuss exactly what's happening. And McCoy looks at what remains of the dead people. And
only one dead person, specifically Schmitter, the one that we saw die in the opening.
Oh, yes. He went to go look and see if he could tell any information. And so when they come back, everyone is looking at the maps because we see the original map that was made last year. And then there's an updated map like over it of what the monster is doing. Because on top of killing people, she's digging holes. She's, going through the planet herself also.
Right.
And McCoy says the men are not dying of like flames, like being in a fire. It's more like they've been thrown into a vat of chemicals because there's only tiny bits of bone and teeth.
They're being dissolved.
So now we know that Mama Monster has like a corrosive agent. Like, we don't know how though, but that's one of her talents.
One of her talents, it's not necessarily primarily a defensive mechanism. It's how they chew through the rock, how they dissolve the rock, how they go tunneling is this corrosive agent. So if it's so corrosive that they can move through the rock so quickly, of course it's going to rip through human flesh.
Right, but I made that comment because Spock gets to touch her, spoiler, and he doesn't burn.
Yes, dumb move by Spock.
He's like, don't touch that, and then he was the one that touches her.
Yeah, and they break off a piece of the monster.
Spock is the one that was able to pick it up, so maybe he's special.
No, he's not special. Oh. They're just being stupid, and they're picking things up they shouldn't be touching. So it's to show that it's not made of a corrosive material. It is something that the monster chooses to excrete, spit out, whatever. Kind of like a snake is venomous, but it's not coated in its own venom. The monster has to project the corrosive agent out of its body. So they have no way to know that when they start touching it, but it's its own thing.
So while the men are in the office talking about what has happened and creating a plan, they hear another person die. And this time, our monster has taken the power reactor, which is what basically is the life force of the colony.
Yeah. So they have the alarm go off after the attack. They run down to the nuclear reactor, which is what powers everything in the colony. and they find that the main circulating pump has been taken. I've seen and read online lots of people providing different explanations to they didn't know that the pump was taken. There was no way for them to know. So at the end, when they're asking where is the pump to get the pump back, that's actually an error in the episode. But it is mentioned when they're in the reactor room. The chief administrator makes the comment, the pump is missing. It's not corroded. It's not destroyed. Because I would imagine there'd be evidence of that. There's just the evidence that the creature used its corrosive acid agent to burn through the outer casing to steal the pump. This is a problem for the colony because nuclear reactors need cooling pumps to keep them cool and keep them in line. So without the pump, the reactor will go critical and spew radiation, explode, whatever. And they can't shut off the reactor. One, it's nuclear, but two, because they can't shut it off, it controls the life support for the colony. So again, the creature, the monster, has escalated and is intelligently finding ways to try to get the miners to leave the planet and to leave her alone.
And then I also found it kind of silly that they didn't have a backup power pump because
100%.
This is supposed to be outdated. Because they're like, oh, we'll ask Scotty to just send one down. And they're like, well, we don't even have one because it's outdated.
Right. Definitely a huge safety violation. You should have backup parts. When you can no longer get those backup parts, you should have been upgrading the system so that it can be serviced. Their response of, well, it's never been a problem before. It's never gone out before. That's not how this works, but...
I mean, especially since it's radiation.
Right. So probably one of the worst managed mining colonies that they have. Very much like corporation putting profit over safety. Because let's face it, they don't have backup parts to run the reactor machinery. Instead of everyone, they knew the Enterprise was coming all the way back to the beginning.
Right.
And they're down there patrolling. They're 3 levels below the main office. Instead of just saying, hey, everyone, let's just come back to the main housing unit and everyone bunker down and we'll wait for the Enterprise to get here for backup. They're still down there patrolling. I believe not as a safety measure. I think they're actively trying to resolve the situation, aka kill the monster
themselves
as quickly as possible so they can get back on track to go mine these materials.
Especially since they found the higher precious metals. That makes a lot of sense, especially with Appel's attitude.
Right. So how many of those 50 people that were reported to have died before the start of the episode could have been saved if the administrator, after 1 or 2 mysterious deaths, had said, something's up, this is obviously a problem, everyone just come back up, hunker down, do something, seal the tunnel. Sealing the tunnel wouldn't work, the monster could just come after him. But I think with all that we know in context...
But if they stopped, she probably would have stopped.
100%. If they left her alone, she would have left them alone until the Enterprise got there, and they could have gone about it in a more efficient manner. I think greed killed those people.
That makes sense. So like I said, they called Scotty and they said, can you do anything to at least hold on, like make it work until we find out what this creature is? And at that time, they were just going to kill it. Everyone was on board for killing it. And he said, well, I will try. And so he and a fellow crew member beamed down to the planet and put together some weird thing. And so it gives them roughly 48 hours to fix everything and hopefully find the reactor intact.
Right. And it's not guaranteed 48 hours. It is a extremely jerry-rigged system. What we end up seeing is this weird contraption that's hanging out outside. It almost looks like a still. I don't really know if it's supposed to be a battery pack to run the pump. It's a pump by itself and it's pumping coolant through it, but it's big. It's obviously thrown together, emphasizing the fact that this is a Band-Aid and not a permanent fix.
So meanwhile, we're back in the office And Kirk, Spock, and McCoy are all discussing what this monster could be. And Spock keeps looking at they call it a stone that's on the desk.
Right.
And why do they have this stone? They found this special looking piece of rock on the 23rd level, and it's all over the place. So it's special in some way, but we don't know why.
Spock has this fascination with it. It's described as just being this silicone sphere. I don't know if it's supposed to be hollow, if they're making any judgment on that. We know it is hollow, or mostly hollow because it's an egg, but I don't necessarily think that it's special in the sense that they go, ooh, this is so magical. It's just a commonly occurring phenomena in the rock. I think it's just unique in the sense that we don't always see this. Much in the same way that if you find diamonds while mining, the diamonds, you know why they're there, you know how they exist, but you know that they're unique. And I think that's the same situation. They themselves think that, oh, we can find these naturally occurring silicone comprised spheres in these conditions, in these mines. It's just kind of unique that we happen to come across a whole bunch of them all at once.
They also start discussing if life can be in a silicone-based world, and McCoy is highly against that, and he's laughing at the possibility. And he's like, that wouldn't even work here because everything is oxygen and carbon. So that's why Spock keeps his opinion on what that ball is to himself.
Do you think in this moment that Spock thinks it's an egg?
Yes.
Okay. Because it's very clear that Spock, because this is Spock's theory, that silicone life could exist, theoretically. Therefore, it's possible that that's what they're encountering here. Kirk also jumps on board to that idea pretty quick, I think. McCoy is definitely more skeptical as the doctor. He says, nope, all life is carbon-based, silicone-based. As theoretical as you want to make it sound probable, it hasn't been proven. There's no examples of it. I'm not going to jump to that conclusion. To me, in the watch through, it's pretty obvious that this is an egg, and I think I agree with you. Spock has already come to the conclusion in this scene that it is an egg for some silicone-based life form.
And, I mean, McCoy is ribbing him, so he doesn't want to have more ribbing from McCoy.
I also think Spock's manner in which he operates, it's a theory that he has next to no evidence for or proof.
Oh, he wants to make sure there's evidence, like logic.
Logically, it would make sense that Spock would want evidence before he tries to present that idea to the other officers there, Kirk and McCoy, so that they don't jump to their own conclusions. So I think he's keeping that idea to himself until he gets more evidence.
And if we're going on the silicone theory, we also have to put our phasers on a more extreme power, because that's why the phaser 1 didn't work, but phaser 2 should work. I didn't understand that, but I understood higher number would mean more power.
It's also the only time that they ever distinguish really between the two. So if you remember from the beginning, when they're running around the opening, when they're running around and they've got the little, they almost look like garage door remote controls. That's the same size. It fits in the palm of your hand. Later in the episode, we see them running around with more traditional looking ray guns.
Oh, okay.
So type 1 would be the handheld version. That's the garage door opener. Phase 2 would be the ray gun looking things. And they're coming to this conclusion because type 1 phaser would have been the phaser that Appel used to shoot the monster when he was reporting that he shot the monster in the beginning. So they have to, if it's a silicone-based life form, they have to use a higher power. Obviously, phase 1 phasers don't work, so they have to use the type 2 phasers. More power could affect the monster. Also wild that, while we're on the subject of the phasers, it probably would have been reported up to Kirk ahead of time, or it should have been, as the Enterprise was in transit. They would have been getting as much information about the situation as possible. So it should have already been reported to Kirk that, hey, we have people, they have these type 1 phasers, they're using the type 1 phasers, we have an officer that used the type 1 phaser, and it didn't have any effect. Wouldn't you think they would have beamed down with the type 2 phasers to begin with?
Well, that only gives you more evidence for your theory that they wanted to win. So now we have Commander Giotto and his security team. They have been down from the Enterprise.
Yes, a
And-
lineup of red-shirted dead men.
Poor guys. But they are there to win. And they are also told to shoot on sight. Like, don't worry, just shoot. So they are sent to the 23rd level, and Chief Vandenberg needs to go back up so he could be safe. Now Kirk and Spock are together. They're just wandering, looking themselves, and Spock has adjusted his tricorder to seek out silicone. And then he's like, oh my gosh, I found a life form.
Right.
We should head over there.
Which is weird that Spock is able to just quickly throw the tricorder into whatever mode he has to find a silicone-based life form when there's no evidence prior to this of what a silicone-based life form is.
He's very talented.
So we don't know what life sign he's locking onto to claim that it's a silicone-based life form, because it would have completely different life signs than carbon-based life. And he's not just scanning for high concentrations of silicone, because they're in the middle of a mine. So they would naturally be high concentrations of silicone all around.
Meanwhile, while they're going that way, on the other side, one of our Enterprise officers is killed without even having a chance to grab his phaser. The monster takes him.
Right. Another scene where we get the point of view of the monster coming upon him, the terrified look before he's overwhelmed by the monster. He doesn't get to fire his phaser, but he does get to scream, which summons Kirk and Spock to the scene to examine the aftermath.
Well, Kirk and Spock are able to shoot the monster together with their phaser, which in turn wounds it again and cuts off a piece of her rock shell.
Right.
And Commander Giotto and his partner catch up to, sadly, their deceased comrade also. And as they look at this new tunnel that this creature magically made, like it got shot and in a new tunnel.
Not magically. It secreted its little corrosive
and burned through
acid and burrowed into the rock. Let's be clear. There's science behind this.
Yes. Well, this is where Kirk, though, gets to deliver his line that there's nothing more dangerous than a wounded animal.
Right. Being overly dramatic.
And I'm pretty sure that our creature looks like lasagna on a rug.
Right. Based on what we've seen now briefly of the creature and the piece that broke off from the creature when it was shot by Kirk and Spock, it definitely resembles it has that lasagna is a good way to describe it.
Well, the piece looks like a pizza,
Yeah.
but I must be hungry.
It's got these oranges, reds, yellows, very much like molten lava. It's got what looks like volcanic rock in and amongst the lava. But of course, they've picked up this piece that fell off the monster. They're holding it in their hands. It's not hot to the touch. There's apparently no corrosive acid anywhere on it because they're able to just kind of pick it up and flop it around like a piece of foam.
Yeah. And Spock even does readings, and he's able to tell that our creature is made of fibrous asbestos.
Right. Again, driving home the idea that this is not a carbon-based life form. It adds to his theory, evidence to his theory, that this is a silicone-based life form.
And again, I don't know how his tricorder does so many different readings, but we are also told that there's only one creature doing this.
Right. There's a conversation about the fact that all of these tunnels exist. There's...
Like in the chief's office where the red and the blue one is?
I have no idea about that. There's hundreds and hundreds of these tunnels that crisscross throughout these mine shafts. And so they start talking about how, well, we've only seen one creature. It's impossible for this one creature to make all of these tunnels. I don't know how he's come to that conclusion. So he starts talking about how this creature would be thousands of years old, that there would have been more of them. At the end, the point of the conversation is to point out that Spock has come to the conclusion that this is the only creature and possibly the last of its kind, motivating Spock to start pushing this idea that they need to capture the creature, not to kill it, so they can study it, which I agree with. It's kind of an important discovery, the first non-carbon-based life form they've encountered. Kirk wants none of it, though. As much as Spock wants to push this idea that it's important for scientific discovery, Kirk is on the warpath at the moment that it just needs to die.
Kirk has Commander Giotto bring his security team, and he explains to them that we want to focus on where we just saw the creature. And Spock speaks up and says, yes, we want to make sure that we are able to capture it so we can study it for science. And Kirk looks over at Spock and says, no, we're shooting to kill, because Kirk doesn't want any more of his men to die.
Right. In the moment, I think this is a character flaw for Kirk, because so many other times we've seen Kirk focus on the scientific and exploration nature of their mission to be out in space. And in this moment, is he ordering the creature be killed so more people don't die? Or is he focusing on getting the mining production back up to quota? Again, I think greed plays a lot into people dying in this episode.
As the men leave, Kirk calls Spock to have a special conversation. He did not mention anything about capturing the creature and keeping it alive. I mean, no one else will be dying today, basically. He then tells Spock that, why don't you go join Scotty up with the reactor and keep it running? Your scientific brain would be better up there. Spock pushes back that Scotty knows what he's doing, and Spock doesn't know anything about nuclear reactors. While Kirk says he doesn't want Scotty to be alone up there. I mean, he has his crew member. He really doesn't want Spock to be down in all the tunnels with the possibility of getting killed himself. And then we have this cute little back and forth about Spock giving the odds of, well, if you're alone down here, this is the odds of you being harmed, but we have other odds, less odds of both of us being harmed if we're together.
Right. The whole time Kirk is trying to dismiss Spock because Spock just tried to countermand his orders. Again, the argument of capturing the creature versus killing the creature. So Spock, by trying to give the idea to capture the creature, is directly countermanding Kirk's authority. So Kirk wants Spock to be removed from the scene. Again, this scene is just kind of weird how it goes from a very serious moment of reprimand between Kirk and Spock, where Kirk is calling Spock out for his act of disobedience and undermining his authority. And now we just have this comical moment between Kirk and Spock about Spock calculating the odds of both of them dying versus only one of them dying. We get the little whimsical musical background interlude as they're discussing it. And then in the end, Kirk decides, okay, even though you just tried to undermine my authority, I'll let you stay. It doesn't fit the episode. It doesn't fit the moment.
And then it seems like Scotty heard them talking about him, because he actually calls down and he lets Kirk know that the contraption he created has finally fallen apart. And what do we do? And Kirk orders to start evacuations of the colony to go up to Enterprise.
Right, because this means the reactor is going to go critical at some point. They have no way to stop it. There's no way to shut it down.
Chief Vandenberg refuses to leave the colony, and he has like a raid party with him, and they are like, we are armed and ready with clubs and sticks. How that's going to beat the fire creature, I have no idea. But don't worry, Ed Appel is with him. Back in the tunnels, Spock can tell that they're being watched. I would presume that she's been watching everybody, the monster.
Yeah. Not quite sure how Spock is aware of this, but
Must be the Vulcan part of him.
must be.
Kirk and Spock realize that the tunnel that they are in has like a fork, and it will meet again further up. So they decide each will go through one part of the tunnel. So one to the left and one to the right. And I loved this part because we see Spock he's pretty much walking through his tunnel, but he's super crouched. And this is when I commented that he was doing leg day.
Yeah, crab walking.
And then Kirk is more like crawling, and then he kneels at the opening. I don't know. I just noticed different ways people move nowadays. And so when Kirk gets around to his, he sees thousands of those little rocks that were on Vanderberg's desk.
Right, the little silicone spheres.
And as he's talking to Spock about what he found, we see the monster kind of like make a landslide. She pushes something over and there's a cave in. And Spock's like, "Are you there? Are you there?" And then Kirk is able to say, "All is well. So keep going your way." And then we see coming out of the wall our monster. And it just like kind of falls out and starts to come toward Kirk. But Kirk raises his phaser as if he's going to shoot it. And it stops. And it backs away. Lowers his phaser. And he raises his phaser when she comes closer. And she backs away. I kind of call it a dance. It was like they were able to communicate.
Well, this moment allowed Kirk to come to the conclusion that the creature's reacting to the sight of the phaser. It's able to recognize the phaser as something that heard it before. So there's signs of intelligence in this life form.
I mean, she even turns around and shows where she was harmed. And it's giant white patch. And I think this time with all this interaction with the creature, I mean, Kirk is like, well, we probably shouldn't kill it. I mean, it hasn't attacked me. And just like you said, intelligence. Meanwhile, Spock has his tricorder and he calls Kirk. He's like, "I think the creature is near." And ironically, yes, Kirk replies, "It's actually in front of me." Spock has come through his tunnel and meets up with Kirk, and he's ready to shoot the creature because, we're going to kill it.
Yep, suddenly Spock is determined to kill the creature, reversing his previous position of studying it. But now Kirk has changed his mind and doesn't want to kill the creature.
I can understand how it'd be confusing if they keep changing their minds. And so we're just going to stare at it. If only there was a way to talk to it. And then Spock says, "Well, I can attempt to do the Vulcan mind meld." "Okay, if you want to try, I will keep cover," Kirk suggests. And standing a bit away from it, Spock attempts to do the meld. And he just shouts over and over the word pain, indicating that the creature is in pain. And, I mean, it was wounded. We just saw that.
Yeah, a lot of the last quarter of this episode is going to be Spock shouting out feelings and thoughts that he's receiving from this creature as we get the fill-in backstory while a lot of other stuff is going on around Spock.
Coming out of the meld, and Kirk is kind of like holding him up, saying, "You're okay, you're back with me, we're okay." The creature jumps onto like a ledge and now can spell.
I think the adjective of jump greatly over exaggerates this mobility of the creature.
Flops itself.
That's better.
And it says, "No, kill, I." One word on top of the other.
Yeah, etches it into the rock with its corrosive acid. We have to assume that the creature has picked up English because the Vulcan mind meld is not a one-way transfer of thoughts and ideas. It is melding of two minds, so it's a two-way street. So it has to be incredibly intelligent to be able to receive that level of information from the mind meld to now know the English language.
Well, that would explain why it just says "no, kill, I," and it's not like a sentence or like you could take it many ways.
Sure, well, it's also, I didn't say it bastard the English language, but it got enough so that it could communicate this little message.
And this is when Spock does tell Kirk that this is an intelligent creature, and they call themselves a Horta.
Yes. For simplicity and for the sake of the episode, I'll summarize the information. The Horta is the alien species that this creature makes up, they, as part of their natural life cycle, every 50,000 years, have a massive dying off event where all of them will die off, but they will select one of them to stay alive to be the quote unquote mother for the next generation. All of them lay eggs, they all die off. The mother, this last remaining Horta, oversees these eggs. New Horta are born. The mother raises them to the point of them being independent, and then I assume the mother dies off. They live for another 50,000 years, and they repeat the process. It just so happens this is the part of the process where everyone else has died off. There's one left, and she is trying to oversee all of these eggs being born to bring in the next generation of Horta. But that also means all those balls are in fact eggs. The mining operation has disrupted and put those eggs in danger, which is why this Horta responded, why it did. It started disrupting their machinery and killing them off to try to save her species.
That's pretty phenomenal. So Kirk calls to McCoy when you need to come down. Just bring your medical bag. Don't ask questions. Just come to where we are. I mean, he's a healer, right? So heal something. He'll figure it out. McCoy arrives, and again, he questions, I treat humans. How am I going to treat this? And again, there's like, just try. And so we then hear him calling up to the Enterprise and asking for something. We don't know yet what it is, but it is beamed down to him, and he starts working on the Horta. Meanwhile, Spock has done another mind meld, and he's learning more about the Horta, getting more information. Commander Giotto and his crew have been holding back Chief Vandenberg's riot. Mob. Like, they're trying to get through to kill the creature, and they are distracted. Chief Vandenberg beats them, and they are raced down to where Kirk and Spock and McCoy are.
Right, with the Horta. Also point out, there's not mention. One, it's dumb that they're all carrying these clubs and things, because the phasers didn't work. Why would the clubs do anything?
It makes no sense.
Two, there's never mentioned any consequence for these miners to assault and beat up the security officers. Because the whole reason they get past the security officers is they do that stupid Three Stooges distraction of, look, over there, here they come, pointing down the tunnel. The security officers turn around to look, and they get jumped and knocked out with the clubs. No consequences for that crime, for these miners, apparently.
I mean, all they do is, if you harm our Horta, you will die.
Once they arrive into the chamber and they're ready to start attacking, yes, Kirk holds them off with the phaser and threatens to kill anyone who tries to attack the Horta.
And this is when Kirk tells them, as you were drilling, you drilled into her nursery, basically, and she's been trying to keep her babies safe.
Right. And Kirk proposes the solution, since it's an intelligent creature. Hey guys, here's literally a life form where there's going to be many more of them soon when all these eggs start to hatch. Maybe you all can work out some kind of compromise where they get to exist and they get to continue their life cycle, and in turn, they will drill and mine these tunnels down to the more precious metals and ores that you guys are looking for anyway, and maybe it could be a symbiotic relationship. And of course, the miners are on board because, as I've mentioned before, greed is what is driving this episode. And they go, oh yeah, it doesn't matter that 50 of our men are dead. It doesn't matter that our actions before were barbaric and we were ready to kill these creatures. Never mind that the creatures don't really have any reason to trust the miners. Maybe humans in general, but certainly not the mob that was ready to kill her a moment ago. But sure, yeah, we'll come to that conclusion and we'll work out a relationship and work together with this creature and her babies so that we can continue to make money.
And then Kirk tells them, you wounded her and she's close to death, so let her pass on nicely. And then McCoy's like, nope, hang on. I fixed her. I can fix anything. I'm God. Pretty much. Well, he actually beamed down from the Enterprise like a housing cement.
Yeah, basically the Enterprise had a type of, I'm going to assume, quick drying cement or some version of it to make emergency shelters. And he said he had 100 pounds of it beamed down so that he could basically just spackle over the wound with this concrete and use it like a bandage. I think 100 pounds was excessive. I read the original script said 10 pounds. Maybe the actor misspoke and said 100 pounds and it was just never corrected. 10 pounds seems more reasonable.
Especially since she can flop around really fast.
Yes, so fast.
So Mama Horta is healed, and now she has her babies, and hopefully Human and Horta can make a deal.
Yeah, I'll also point out after McCoy says he's healed her and he's used the concrete as a bandage, his hands are completely covered with cement. We never actually get to see the bandage on the Horta. If you look, he has stepped out in front of the Horta and through, I assume has to be deliberate camera placement, his body blocks the site of the wound because I don't think they're actually going to put concrete on the costume.
No, and we see his hands twice. The first time I wrote, is he wearing gloves? But like twice, he's just like covered in cement. So hopefully he takes it off fast.
Right.
Because he's going to be cement hands. So now we are back on the Enterprise, and it is only Kirk, McCoy, and Spock that are on the bridge, and they get a call from Vandenberg, who is calling to say the eggs have begun to hatch, and these little guys start burrowing right away. And then he goes on about how they've been able to get all the per diem that they need, on top of crazy amounts of gold, platinum, and other rare minerals. And then he goes on to say, once you get over how they look, implying that they're ugly, and it's not too hard to do their jobs. And he's like, thanks for the update. Bye. Kirk. And then Spock, he actually jokes back with Kirk and McCoy how when he was melding with the Horta, she was also saying, I got to get over how the humans look, but we'll probably be able to do that deal. And Spock didn't want to tell anybody of that because he didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. And McCoy thought he would be even more funny and say how she must have been, most concerned about Spock's ears. And Spock turns it back going, well, she liked mine the best.
Yeah, found him the most attractive, or at least his ears were the most attractive quality in these humans, because she wouldn't know, the Horta wouldn't know that Spock isn't a human. They just look alike to her. So, and I actually like this ending.
Yes.
Many episodes try to, at the end, have these little comical bookend to the episode where there's a little bit of playful banter back and forth between a couple of the characters. A lot of times it just feels like it falls flat.
Especially like the weird looks.
Yeah, but I think this time with this little banter about Spock's ears, I really do feel like this really does fit and is enjoyable and entertaining.
And it says more about what you were saying, how interaction with the meld partner, I learned a lot.
And roll credits. So, Jackie, what did you think about season 1, episode 25, The Devil in the Dark? What are your final thoughts?
I really liked it overall, but then you mentioning greed, that kind of put a taint, it kind of tainted it all. But I mean, it does show the reality of humans and mining.
Yeah. And again, I like the episode. It's very entertaining, or I find it very entertaining. There's a couple weird moments to it that stand out. I mentioned the quick shift in tone when Kirk is reprimanding Spock for undermining his authority in front of the security officers. There's a hot take, the whole back and forth mind meld. I think it's an important and vital part of the plot. Everyone commends Leonard Nimoy's performance in that mind meld, and I think he does a great job.
Yeah, really great.
But I also think it drags on far too long. I think it is, if you jump all the way back to when we first learn of the Vulcan mind meld in the episode Dagger of the Mind, when Spock is performing that mind meld on the doctor to get the information. Again, it's an extremely long, drawn-out process. Later in Star Trek, when we see Vulcan mind melds, it's much shorter. I don't know if that's because the audience is now accustomed to the idea and it doesn't need to be oversold to us, but if it had just been shortened a little bit, I don't know. It almost felt like they were trying to fill in time for the episode, and maybe that's why it stood out. But ultimately, again, final thought, it's a great episode. We'll round out our thoughts for the episode with our favorite quote from the episode. Jackie, what is your favorite quote?
I actually liked, "I'm a doctor, not a bricklayer. You're a healer. That's a patient. That's an order." That was McCoy and Kirk talking back and forth when McCoy was ordered to help the Horta. I mean, help her. It's a patient. It shows compassion and not judging this thing when you could and just let it die. I mean, if you have the opportunity to help something, be kind and assist it.
And my favorite quote from the episode is when Scotty is first showing the improvised reactor pump to Kirk and talking about trying to make it last as long as possible. And Kirk tells Scotty, write herd on it. Kind words, tender, loving care. Kiss it, baby it, flatter it if you have to, but keep it going. And Scotty, of course, replies with, "I'll do what I can, sir." I like the quote because it's one of the first times that I can remember in the series. Scotty will eventually very much start to refer to the Enterprise as a person, as a woman. And there's, famous Scotty lines of, she's giving it all she can, Captain, and so forth. And I think this is one of those first times that really establishes, I think Kirk is communicating this way to Scotty because Kirk understands that Scotty kind of puts a personality into these machines. And it just is one of the great, I think, moments that establishes that character trait for Scotty. So that's going to be my favorite quote. And of course, we also have our fun facts or Tribble tidbits for the episode. And why do we call them Tribble tidbits, Jackie?
Because tribbles are fabulous.
Because they can be both a blessing and a curse. First airing March 9th, 1967. It's quoted in one of William Shatner's biographies that this is his favorite episode. This is an episode while filming, his father died. Kirk says that one of the moments is he got the news, and then later Leonard Nimoy was able to make him laugh as he was delivering his lines during the mind meld. That's quoted from the book, but there's also evidence that Kirk was not present during those scenes. He had left to attend to family matters with his father's death. So a lot of the scenes with the mind meld, they had already filmed his lines, and when they're doing shots and we see Kirk's back, it's actually Kirk's stunt double. So he's not present. So I don't really know when Kirk would have heard these lines delivered that he references in his book. Maybe it was a table read, but then the table read would have taken place before his father's death. So again, I'm just quoting his
maybe it was a phone call.
His book. Well, he got William Shatner, who plays Kirk, got the phone call from his mother while on set during filming, and it was specifically as they were filming that scene where the first security officer is killed. That's why I mentioned the moment where Kirk kneels down to kind of reflect over the crewman's death. It was very shortly after he had received the news that his father has died. So that moment of reflection was real because he was channeling that opportunity and that grief of his father dying. So, and of course, also important to note, the entire production, when they got the news that his father has died, was absolutely ready to shut down filming and allow him to immediately depart to go take care of matters. Shatner himself insisted that the filming continue for the rest of the day. So he departed at the end of the day and finished out the scenes. The Horta costume was created by an actor named Janos Prohaska. He showed it to Gene Kuhn, who was a writer. And Gene asked Janos what it was, and Janos responded, "It can be anything you want." So Gene took 4 days and wrote the script to this episode, specifically just so this costume could be used.
That is amazing.
Janos, the creator of the costume, is actually the actor underneath who was wearing it and doing the acting in the episode.
Even better.
Jaci choosing her quote of McCoy's line, "I'm a doctor, not a bricklayer," is actually iconic because this is going to become a signature line that McCoy will use throughout the rest of Star Trek, where he says, "I'm a doctor, not a whatever," in reference to a situation that he's being put in. So this is the first use of that line.
So this episode is like a big like introduction to a lot of things in the series.
Right. Well, and diving deeper, this episode is a springboard. This is one of the times where we get an alien creature that has deep lore in Star Trek. This is not the first time that we see the Horta in Star Trek. The Horta go on to be in future Star Trek episodes, at least one episode I can think of, but they're also in comics, books, novels.
Wow.
So it is a good episode, foundation for a lot of good Star Trek lore.
I think it's inspiration for Aladdin's flying carpet.
Sure, Disney stole this. We mentioned, of course, the Horta eggs are just toy bouncing balls. Jackie picked up on it right away when she watched the episode. I actually saw them in the episode and I couldn't remember what they were. I had to look it up to find out what they were, but they are toy bouncing balls.
Did you think ostrich egg?
I didn't think they were ostrich eggs. I, of course, knew they were a prop. I was just curious as to what they would have been. So it would they
In your local grocery store.
Yeah. It was announced by NBC during the closing credits of this episode, so to the audience, that Star Trek had been renewed for a second season. So this is the moment where Star Trek fans learned that we are getting a second season to the show. And then finally, this is going to be the only Star Trek episode, at least in the original series, where there are no speaking female lines.
That's weird. I didn't notice that because I was busy like enjoying the episode.
Yeah, so we do see a couple female crew members on the Enterprise when we get the shots with Scotty on the bridge, but none of them have speaking parts. And there's, of course, no female miners. There's no female members of the security team that beamed down. The away team is male cast members. So, yeah, it's a good point. I guess we should amend it to say
She has her own harem.
There's no verbal female lines because the Horta does have the non-speaking part where she engraves the message into the rock face.
That's awesome.
But
does she learn better English, like the Horta, over time?
Yes, they do.
That's cool.
There are members of the Horta that will eventually join Starfleet.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's a big deal. But those are your Tribble Tidbits. This is where we share our episode ranking, where we pretend the episode is a member of our crew, and we assign a Starfleet rank to the episode. A higher rank, of course, means we found the episode not only more entertaining, but we consider it a more important crew member for our ship. A lower rank, of course, means the opposite. We didn't find the episode very entertaining, and they're a more disposable member of our crew. Our ranking system starts with the enlisted, starting with ensign at the lowest, lieutenant junior grade, and lieutenant. And then we have our officers. We can have 7 lieutenant commanders, 5 commanders, 1 captain, and 1 admiral. If none of that makes sense, don't worry. We post a visual representation of our rankings over at our Patreon, patreon.com/Treks and Tangents. And we post an updated ranking every Wednesday, the day after the episode goes live. Jackie, for your starship, the USS Galactic Glitter Bee, what rank do you give this episode?
I think I'm going to go out there and put it as a captain. I mean, I enjoyed it a lot. And then with your added facts, I mean, just kind of like bumped it up knowing more about it. So I think I'm just going to put it as a captain.
All right. And for my starship, the USS Cosmic Shark, we're going to shuffle it up a little bit. We're going to ignore the haters. I'm going to take Space Seed, and I'm going to move it down from Captain to Lieutenant Commander. Again, Space Seed, fantastic episode. It establishes the backstory of Khan, iconic Star Trek villain. But at the end of the day, I don't really see him to be that much of a peak character. Khan doesn't really come into his own until we get Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, the movie. So, bumping it down, still an important episode, and I'm going to put The Devil in the Dark as a captain. Again, there's problems with the episode. I think toward the end, the pacing of the episode gets to be too much with the whole mind meld with Spock. We could have had Leonard Nimoy's performance shortened quite a bit and still gotten the same impact, and it just felt like they were filling for time. But you have the iconic opening where it's not just on the bridge of the Enterprise. It opens up with drama, with a miner's death, a character's death. The entire plot of the episode, besides what I just mentioned, is paced very well. Lots of fun camera work, great set pieces. And at the end of the day, it makes sense, I think. A lot of the plot just makes sense and doesn't leave you scratching your head and trying to fill in plot holes. So we're going to give it the rank of captain. Again, don't forget to visit our Patreon, patreon.com/Treks and Tangents, to check out the full episode ranking. We will publish this update Wednesday, the day after this episode goes live. Compared to IMDb, this is going to be one of the top-rated episodes for the season. As of this recording, it's ranked 8.3 out of 10.
We loved it more.
We'll be back next week to trek through another episode, but before we go, we'll give our turbolift tease or elevator pitch to the next episode's plot. I'm going to give Jaci the title of next week's episode, and Jaci, without any other information, is going to try to guess that plot. Jaci, next week's episode is going to be Errand of Mercy.
Sometimes I think that they're going to focus more on just what's happening on the Enterprise at times. And we're going to be introduced to a new member of the crew, and they have done something naughty, but Kirk is making them do another errand on the Enterprise because we have to learn more about it. Like, I'm sure there's other stages. And so in order to get the good graces, this new character has to do something very important.
And tune in next week to see how accurate Jaci's guess is. If you want more show information, you can find and directly support our podcast on Patreon, patreon.com/Treks and Tangents. As mentioned, we post the episode ranking graphic every Wednesday. We also are posting a bonus episode free for all Patreon members where we just take one random topic or question from the episode and do a deep dive into it with our thoughts, some theory crafting, our own headcanon for Star Trek, diving into topics deeper, going into a wider range, a larger tangent. That'll be posted at the same time as the episode. We're also going through our back catalog and catching up on our star notes. So really, you get 2 bonus episodes until we're all fully caught up. We have other content on there for our crew members, those who directly support our Patreon. We have a monthly episode where we do a deep dive into the animated series. We have all of our test episodes, and we've got some other ideas we're cooking on. Hopefully we'll get to some of that soon.
You should definitely check out the test episodes where you had lots of fun.
But to round it out, if you go check out the star note for this week's episode, the question that we do a deeper dive into is going to be, could the Federation have communicated with the Horta without telepathy? So jump over to that Patreon. So jump over to our Patreon to check out that episode at the end. If you want to follow us on social media, we're on X at Treks_Tangents. We're also on Instagram and Blue Sky as Treks and Tangents. But Jaci, where can people find you, and what are you up to?
I am really focusing on my Instagram at the moment, and you can find me as Jaboom, JIBBOOM. I'm almost to 1,000 followers, which is my first little tiny goal. I have my music. I have my fashion, makeup. I also have disability advocacy. And of course, don't forget the dogs and their training journeys.
And you can watch me stream a variety of video games over at twitch.tv/PiratePoundTown. I'm also thinking I'm going to start co-streaming on YouTube. I haven't quite figured that out yet, but if I'm not streaming on Twitch or on YouTube, I do post a variety of video game and other random content on YouTube under my main channel, Pirate Pound Town. Coin collecting and other hobby content can be found at Pirate Treasure Hunting. I post socially on Blue Sky at Pirate Pound Town, and I'm still found on Instagram under Pineapple Cannibal. Links to all social media mentioned can be found in the episode description. Thank you everyone for tuning in to this week's episode. We hope you had fun like we did, and we will see you all next week.
I wonder if a Horta could play a musical instrument.
End transmission.